There's something about being in a car at night. You're sealed off from the world, just you, the road, tunes on the radio, and your headlights, cutting a little tunnel of light through the endless dark. But sometimes what's out there in the darkness doesn't stay out there. Drivers have seen figures going about their business from centuries ago. Shadows have been seen that were never cast by the living. But the road itself can also play tricks on you, even when you're not driving, leaving you questioning your own eyes. I think there is something truly terrifying about seeing something that you can't explain while you're out driving alone at night. Because on the one hand, yes, you can speed away into the night and hopefully leave behind whatever it is that you think you saw. But on the other hand, you're out in the open. If anything happens to your car, you're stuck out there with whatever it is. And I think we've all seen too many horror movies that start with broken down cars to be comfortable in that situation. And while in this first story, the car thankfully didn't break down, both the driver and passenger were left reeling by what they saw on the road in front of them one night. After finishing work quite late, maybe around 8 p.m, my partner had met me from the training ground where I was coaching football, and we decided to go for a pub dinner, as we quite frequently did at that point in time. I mean, you truly cannot beat it though, when you both look at each other with that same look of, go pub for tea? Yes, pub for tea. Magic. There is a pub not far from where we lived back then called the Peacock Inn on Icknield Street on the B38. Interesting to know that this is a Roman road itself. The pub indeed has its own story of a Roman legionnaire which haunts its grounds. I must add that I've been to that pub maybe 100 times and never seen a thing. Anyhow, we had our meals and made a night of it. We stayed until last orders and then jumped in the car. That is a successful pub dinner. Also, is it dinner or tea? What do you call it? I switch between the two because I am a law unto myself, but I know that some people have stronger feelings on it. So comment what it is in your house. We were driving along a country lane just after 11:30 p.m. and it was the 19th of November 2018. From memory, it was a Monday night. And as you might well imagine, it was a pitch black night at that time of year. At a point during the journey, we reached the brow of a hill on the lane we were travelling along, our headlights affording us a good view of the dip in front of us, and the subsequent rise again of the road afterwards. As it was winter, there were no leaves or foliage on the trees, so we had a better than normal view. As we crested the brow of the hill, my partner, who was driving, slammed her brakes on, with the headlights still set on full beam. Because in the distance, at the bottom of the hill, was what appeared to be something like 20 or 30 Roman soldiers coming out of the field to our left and crossing the road dead ahead of us. You gotta watch out for those Roman soldier crossings, they'll sneak up on you. Like zebra crossings, but more otherworldly. The men seemed solid, but colours were hard to make out, as they seemed to be lit by a light source coming from behind them, like a spotlight. We originally thought that this was moonlight perhaps, but in revisiting the scenario from memory, this now seems unlikely, as it was too bright and at ground level. Once they had crossed the road, they seemed to disappear into the darkness of the opposite field, which would possibly seem to suggest that moonlight wasn't involved. We both sat in silence, watching the scene unfold about 100 to 200 metres ahead of us. I personally was in a state of disbelief and shock, maybe even fear. My partner was able to put her feelings into words, however, and simply said, "What the f*** is that?" That is about the right combination of words for that situation, I would say. While we didn't manage to actually count the precise number of men involved, I was able to see that all of the men were on foot, except for one who was on horseback at the very front of the group. The foot soldiers appeared to be walking in twos, side by side, and the horse was large, like Shire horse size, with bushy, furry legs. The mounted soldier appeared to be carrying a big, stick-like object with something around the top of it. However, it was hard to make out this object precisely due to the fact that it was witnessed side on. Amazingly, no other cars or traffic came up or down the road in this space of time, and once the coast was clear, we drove apprehensively down the hill and back up the other side. What really flabbergasted us was the fact that at the bottom of the hill, where the figures had made their way onto the road surface, There was no physical gap in the field border or hedgerow involved. So then at that point you know that you didn't just disturb a reenactment group doing a night hike or something like that. I have been lucky enough, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, to see a ghost when I was younger, maybe 15 years old, and this was the typical translucent figure which scared the hell out of me. But these figures seemed, from a distance, like normal people. This will ring bells in its similarity to the chap in York. I've researched this a lot in years since this happened, but I can assure you, me and my now wife had not heard that story at that time. Big fan, by the way. Thank you very much. Yeah, you hear of Roman soldier ghosts and you immediately think of the Treasurer's house in York, where then 18-year-old Harry Martindale, an apprentice heating engineer, he claimed to see Roman soldiers walking through the cellar in 1953. In a pretty similar setup to this witness as well, with foot soldiers walking 2 by 2, and I think he saw a horse too. But again, they were solid, so you'd be forgiven for thinking that they were real living people, barring the fact that they had just materialised through a wall and were now walking on something a foot below the solid ground. The details. I did see that this listener had actually posted their experience on Reddit too about a year ago, and in the comments they narrowed down the breed of the horse to an Ardennes, a breed which the Romans did actually use. It is fascinating though how most Roman ghost stories that you hear about are just soldiers marching somewhere. With other residual hauntings, it's usually thought to be because something happens that's extremely high emotion, like a murder or a traumatic event or anything like that. But you never hear of stories of Roman soldiers replaying their battle or anything like that. It's always just marching. Whether it's knowing that they're about to go into battle and that anxiety and the nerves, or whether they're marching after winning or losing the battle and maybe they've lost friends and fathers, brothers, and that's going to leave some sort of psychological mark. I don't know, but have you heard of any other explanations as to why we only seem to see these ghostly soldiers marching? But for now, this next very short witness account, while the entities aren't quite as clear, they're just as, if not more, terrifying. Stocksbridge Bypass. I drive this road a lot and often see what looks like semi-transparent people on the bridge above. Sometimes they're children, sometimes adults, but always staring straight ahead. 110% not living people, but people nonetheless. That is a shocking mental image of these characters just standing there staring straight ahead with absolutely no emotion. That is out of a horror movie. But I mean, after I put out the video on Stocksbridge Bypass, the comments section was full of people seeing strange things. This witness went on to say that this road has been notorious for serious road traffic collisions for decades, many of which have been sadly fatal. But yeah, it did very quickly develop a reputation as a killer road. The first fatal accident happened something like 3 months after it first opened. At least you're not at risk of mistakenly picking up any of these as hitchhikers. They're not asking for a lift, unlike some characters on that road. Including a smelly monk, I think. I seem to remember that one getting talked about quite a lot. But what Diane saw in this next story may have been less just a creepy encounter, although still very much that, but also an omen. This happened in my hometown in Los Angeles, California, in the United States. It happened early in 2000, I want to say January or February. I was coming home late from my boyfriend's house at about 3 a.m. There were hardly any cars on the road and usually it was a quiet drive home. I didn't expect anything other than the odd drunk driver I might have to keep away from. Not going to lie, I do absolutely still love driving at that time. The roads are quiet, you'll just pass a few lorries, just stick your music on and drive. And if these stories are anything to go by, you might see a ghost too. To get to my house, I turn off the main street and down a smaller street that's still a main road in our neighbourhood. Think about going from 4 lanes to 3 lanes. The section where you turn off takes you through a housing block, so it's quiet, no cars. I saw something to my left in the trees that lined the street. As I got close, I slammed on my brakes and stopped. Floating in front of a tree were 2 hooded black shadows that were just there. They didn't do anything other than float there. They weren't huge shadows, but about 4 or 5 feet maybe. But I was sitting there trying to process what I was seeing and I thought to myself, they look like the shadows from the movie Ghost. That thought scared me, realising I might be looking at death, and I slammed on the accelerator, tearing out of there. Yeah, that thought process of, oh, what is that? Oh, that's really weird. Oh, that reminds me of, you know what? It's 3 a.m. I shouldn't be out here at this time anyway. Let me just skedaddle. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, but nothing followed me. To this day, I've never told my family this story because within 6 months, my grandmother had a stroke, which she survived, but my dad passed away 8 months later. I have never had an experience like that since, but my family and I have always experienced things that we can't explain. I was wide awake because I was driving, so it wasn't a tiredness thing, and I was always careful about that. If I was tired, I stayed at my boyfriend's house and slept there. But yeah, I think I saw death coming for my family. That is such a scary thought though, to not have seen anything like that before or since. I'm assuming that you made that trip to your boyfriend's multiple times, and then to have such a horrific time with your family, that's absolutely awful. But the way that they were just there floating, that's not like you seeing just two random blokes standing at the side of the street. That's really creepy. But this next story from Todd takes this to a whole other level, which I realise is actually quite a funny joke, which will become funny to you as well once you hear this story. I started having experiences when I was a very young child, but like many, I assume, the adults in my life explained things away to put me at ease, and so after a while, I stopped believing in the things that I was experiencing. But I grew up having an interest in folklore, and especially ghost stories. My grandmother and great-grandmother were great storytellers, and the favourites of my cousin and mine were the ghostly tales that they told, especially the ones that they claimed were true and that had happened to them personally. However, by that point, the damage was done, and I didn't really believe them, only that the claim made them feel like better stories. Ooh, this is a true story. It gets me every time, even when horror movies say this is based on a true story. I'll always have to go and read up on what the true story actually was. Well, something happened to me that changed my mind and opened me up to all of the things that have happened to me throughout the rest of my life. This story takes place back in 1978 when I was just a young lad. My girlfriend and I were making the drive out to Maple Mount to attend a concert at Mount St. Joseph Academy. My girlfriend's aunt was the Mother Superior at the convent in those days, and the concert featured the Eastman School of Music's trombone choir, of which my girlfriend's cousin was a member. The concert took place in the chapel of the church, and was much more impressive than anything I had anticipated. Afterwards, there was a reception, punch and cookies with the nuns, and as the clock was nearing midnight, I asked my girlfriend if she was ready to leave. I had to be at work early the next morning. She was, and so we headed out to the car and took off along the roads that wind their way out of Maple Mount and through the hills, twists and turns of the small community of West Louisville. It was late, we were tired, and neither of us was saying anything, just listening to the radio as we rode through the night. The moon was high and there was fog laying low in the fields, but lower than the road, which was slightly elevated. Just the perfect setting for a ghost story. Love it. We'd just come out of a hairpin turn and started into the first straight stretch of road that we'd seen in a while, when he was there. A man walking along the road. He was at the far end of the stretch, perhaps a quarter-mile distant. There were trees at the far end there, whose branches met as they crossed the road, forming what looked like the mouth of a tunnel. This fellow was walking along just underneath them. Now, everyone has seen a person walking along the road at night. And that is just what this fellow looked like. His arms were swinging as he strode along. His clothing was nondescript, quite unremarkable. In fact, there was absolutely nothing strange about him at all, except for one thing. This man was not walking along the side of the road. He was walking in the middle of my lane. And he was making no effort to move over. Well, being the young wag that I was in those days, I was preparing to make some smart alecky remark like, well, if he doesn't get over, I guess I'll just have to run him over. But what I was also preparing to do is to slow down and move over into the oncoming lane and assess the situation. Absolutely, you have to have the remark ready to get the laugh in, but in reality, you are doing the responsible thing. Was this person drunk? Had he had an accident? Was he hurt or needing help? Or was he looking for trouble and was going to throw a brick at us as we went past? I don't know, but I didn't want to run him over accidentally if he fell over and I was going by too close and too fast. But before I could do either of those things, say my smart aleck remark or slow down and move over, this man began to float up into the air. He did what now? It was a slow and steady rise. His arms were still swinging and his legs still moving, but he was now going up instead of forward. Every hair on my body stood at attention. My eyes were wide. My hands were tight on the wheel. I was doing everything I could to maintain a steady course. My body felt as though someone had touched two bare electrical wires to the base of my spine. Every muscle tight. I'm not certain I took a breath. As we grew closer, he floated higher. Just before we got to the trees, he disappeared into the overhanging branches. We sped past underneath seconds later, and I felt a tremendous chill. I looked back into the rearview mirror. I suppose I was looking to see if he would float back down. He didn't. After we left the cover of the branches and were a few yards further down the road, I looked over to my girlfriend. "Did you see that?" I asked. "Don't say anything, just get us out of here," was her shouted, sensible reply. I took that as a yes and stepped on the gas. That is definitely the response of, yes, I saw it, I'm still trying to process it, and let's not talk about it in case it somehow magically hears us and comes back home with us. We did not say a word the rest of the drive home. All the way, my brain was trying to process this new input, rethinking what was possible in the world. The fact that when my grandmother and great-grandmother had told me their ghost stories that they purported to be true, perhaps they weren't just trying to make them a better story. Maybe they were true, after all. Months afterwards, my girlfriend and I were talking on the phone, and I asked her about the incident. We'd not spoken of it at all in the time since. Say, that night driving back from Mount St. Joe, what did you see? I saw the same thing that you did. A man was walking down the road and he floated up in the air. Oh, that's what I thought. Well, that incident opened my brain right back up again to what was possible in the world. When you have an open mind and perhaps just a touch of the gift, as my grandparents like to call it, lots of things begin to present themselves. Like the nearly 50 years or so of stories I have experienced afterward. Now I've just got to know why there was a man floating in the middle of the road. Had there used to be a hill there, maybe? And you were just seeing him walk up a hill that isn't there anymore? Or was he being very slowly abducted by aliens without realising it? At the very least, he moved out of the way of your car. The same cannot be said for this next story. I was born in Portsmouth in the late 50s, and after 2 years away, we returned to live in Portsmouth from January 1963, when we moved back from Portchester. My mom had a long-time lady friend from back in her school days named Maggie, who lived close by and visited us each week. She was a very serious lady, not prone at all to flights of fancy or imagination in any way. Indeed, the opposite. Maggie was very down to earth and the last person whom you would have expected to have a ghost experience. And it's always those sorts of people who have the wildest stories. I had several ghost books about one day when she called to visit my mum. Around 1973 this was. One of them was 50 Great Ghost Stories, plus 2 books by James Wentworth Day, a friend and mentor of Peter Underwood. They were both members of the Ghost Club in London. The other books were Here Are Ghosts and Witches from 1954 and In Search of Ghosts from 1969. Gonna have to add those to my shopping list. I don't think I have those. The 3 books were on a coffee table in our living room when Mum's friend Maggie broke off from chatting with my mum and looked at them. She asked if I was interested in the paranormal. I said very much. Maggie then proceeded to tell Mum and I about her own strange experience, which she told us had occurred when she was a younger girl back in 1950 on the Eastern Road, a very long road which leads in and out of Portsmouth. The Eastern Road was built back in 1933, I think, which may become important later. It's a long, largely straight road on which cars tend to speed along very fast. Sadly, it has been something of an accident black spot over the years, with a number of bad accidents and several fatalities. There is at least one roadside memorial there now for a guy killed in the 1980s, I think. And I know of fatal accidents in the 60s and 70s. Even 2 airplane crashes nearby in the early 70s when Portsmouth had an airport situated beside the Eastern Road. and 2 planes overshot the grass runway. I had no idea that Portsmouth even had its own airport at one time, and with a grass runway. Back in 1950, it was of course a much quieter, less used road. Maggie told us that she had one evening gone to visit a friend who lived off the city end of the road. It was summer and a warm night when she departed to ride her pushbike home towards Copner Road, the area across the railway tracks where she lived, around 10:30 p.m. It was getting dark and there were very few cars around as Maggie rode her bike along. She was coming up towards where the golf club hut is. I think that's still there, though it's probably closed now. As she rode along, she saw the figure of a young woman up ahead, who then crossed out straight into the road right in front of her. Maggie immediately jammed on her bike brakes and shuddered to a halt just before she hit the woman, who promptly vanished. Maggie told us that she was frozen in fear and felt ice cold despite it being a warm evening. She knew something was not right about this incident. Indeed, she told us that she said a prayer, the Hail Mary, to break her freeze, and that did the trick, breaking the hold upon her. And on remounting her bike, she quickly rode home as fast as she could. Yeah, without the safety of a metal box surrounding you like you would in a car, I think I would like to process that one at home too. On arriving home, her parents could see that she'd suffered a shock. Her father offered her a brandy, which she normally would never touch. But on this occasion she did, and was glad of the drink. Mum told me later that Maggie never drank alcohol in all of the years that she had known her. Maggie said that she never rode her bike home that way again, going the longer way around instead, despite it taking about half an hour longer to get home from her friend's house. We were both amazed at Maggie telling us about such a weird paranormal experience, as it was totally out of character for her being such a down-to-earth lady. An extra half an hour detour on a bike is not an insignificant amount of time either, so for her to choose that route home just shows how much this encounter affected Maggie. I did learn later, if it is relevant, that apparently back in the 1920s, a young woman was murdered out in the fields in that area where later the Eastern Road was built. Apparently she was assaulted and strangled, and her boyfriend, who was a sailor, was arrested and stood trial for her murder, but he was found not guilty and released. Sometime later, on telling Maggie's ghostly tale to my sister and my father, my dad, who was in the Royal Navy in the late 40s to 1960, advised us that there was still talk in the Navy among the men about the sailor who stood trial for a young woman's murder back in the 1920s, even then, many years later in the 50s. Was this in any way connected to Maggie's ghostly encounter? I've never heard of any other accounts of the figure of a young woman being seen on the Eastern Road. Maggie, along with both my mum and dad, are all now deceased, so the account is pure history now. Though sadly, bad accidents continue to happen on the Eastern Road, mostly further up the road from where Maggie had her encounter. But I always think of young Maggie riding her bike along there in 1950, whenever we go down into Portsmouth, mostly now to visit our family graves in Kingston Cemetery, and especially when we go in along the mega busy car-filled Eastern Road, which is forever being closed for repairs these days. So you attach a story like that with those sorts of bits of information, I'm just going to have a look into it. So I didn't find any victim who was found out in the fields where Eastern Road ended up being built. However, I found a story which was quite similar, with a strange extra detail. In January 1923, a woman called Mary Pelham was discovered in her home in Portsmouth, dead. She had been beaten and strangled, and witnesses described how she was last seen with a sailor. But despite efforts to find him, no one was charged with her murder. A year after that, though, I did see a news article about how a sailor had jumped overboard after confessing to the murder. But they didn't really take him seriously about his confession, as they just thought that he was insane. So just an all-around tragic, sad story. I didn't find any more encounters either with this woman on Eastern Road, so if you've ever heard that story or heard about someone else seeing a ghostly woman walk out into the road, please do tell us about it in the comments. But this next story takes a different turn from what we've heard this episode. Nothing jumping out at you in the night, no weird feelings, but even so, possibly one of the more unsettling accounts. This happened back in the late 70s, long before The Matrix was conceived of, or the Wachowski brothers had hit puberty even, so my friends and I just chalked it up as weird. To set the scene, disco was at its height, and my friends and I were just of legal age to go clubbing and drinking. Not that we'd not done it illegally before then. Saturday nights generally consisted of a group of us meeting at our local neighbourhood pub in the suburbs, and then heading to the city centre to whichever nightclub the majority vote got that night. Me being that bit older than my mates, I was the only one at the time that had a driving licence, so it usually fell to me to be the transport for the group. Okay, my car wasn't the latest thing, about 12 years old at the time, but it got us to where we wanted to go, for the most part. Hey man, you just need something that's going to get you from A to B. Doesn't have to be flashy. On the night that this event happened, there was myself and my 2 best friends since the beginning of secondary school, plus the girlfriend of one of them. We decided to go to an out-of-the-way club that was situated in the more business section of the city centre. Law offices, insurance, banking, etc. So, on a Saturday night, the streets were relatively clear, making for easy on-street parking. The few other cars parked around probably belonged to other late-night clubbers like ourselves. This section of the town is laid out like this: long, downhill, sloping main streets that are parallel to each other, with shorter side streets linking them block by block down their lengths. Typical of that part of the old centre of Birmingham, UK, and the mostly Victorian-era buildings. So we all arrive, and I park the car in a space about halfway down the side street, which was literally around the corner from that evening's chosen club. Great, not too far to walk, we all agreed. Because of that, we all left our coats and that girlfriend's overnight bag in the back seat. Being a car from the 60s, there was no such thing as central locking, and car alarms were custom speciality items back then. So I had to go around, locking 3 of the 4 doors from the inside, then my driver's door with the key, and checking all of the handles outside. Car crime wasn't really bad in those days, but it still happened, and so I always had a mind for security. Plus, I was carrying my work toolbox and power tools in my boot, so that was firmly locked as well. Having had personal experience in Birmingham on a night out parking a car, you don't want to come back from the club that you're in and find those things are gone. That would be bad. With that done, we all walked left around the corner and up the slight gradient, past 2 or 3 office frontages and left into the front door of the club. After a great night, with me disco dancing most of the night with any girl that was keen, or even on my own, hey, it was the 70s. The club was beginning to turn out. Slow dance tracks from the DJ heralded the end of the fun, and we all gathered to leave. As usual for those days, having spent the night frantically dancing, I had sweated out the little alcohol I'd consumed, and was easily safe to chauffeur my pals home. We left via the main and only door, and as a group we turned right and down the slope to the next corner, to where we knew we'd left the car. My heart sank when I turned that corner though. The street was completely empty. Oh, crap. And other choice words. We all said mostly the same thing at the same time. The car's been stolen. Yeah, that's exactly what you want to avoid. Not only are your tools gone, your entire car is gone. It had been right there at the curb, facing the corner that we had just come around. There was a lot of, what do we do now? And me worrying that not only my car, but all of my tools were gone. What made it worse was that, being the young bucks that we were, we'd blown most of our meagre funds during the night out, and probably couldn't even scrounge up the bus fare home between us. First things first, after much head scratching, we all agreed that it was best to report the theft as quickly as possible. It was the days before mass communication, but there might be an outside chance that the car could be spotted by a patrol car. Panda cars, they were called back then, and not many of them compared to today. This meant a hike to the nearest police station. Remember, no mobile phones back then. On the other side of the city centre. Quicker and easier than finding a call box / payphone in this part of town and at this time of night. We all set off dejectedly in that direction, which meant continuing along the short side street that we were on, onto the next parallel main street and up that long hill to the major road that joined all of the main streets together at their top ends. Then it would be a diagonal cut across the city centre to the police station by the law courts. There was little conversation, but it mostly consisted of, "Are you sure you locked it?" "Yes, I'm bloody sure I locked it. I'm not stupid." etc. And wishing the worst curses on whoever had ruined our Saturday night. And that's the thing, you've just had this brilliant time, you've had a fantastic night out, you should be dropping your mates off and crashing in your own bed, and instead you're still walking at like 4 in the morning. It's just not what you want. We'd just made our way onto and partway up the next main block, passing another side street to our left. Then, during that next block, we decided to zigzag up the streets to make our route a little shorter, roughly diagonal in the direction that we needed to go. By this time, the chill 2 a.m. air had sobered up even my 2 friends and the girlfriend, and we were just stomping along to get the thing over as quickly as possible. As we all simultaneously rounded the left corner into the next short side street, we all came to a dead stop. There was my car, parked neatly at the curb in a parking meter space, and not looking at all abandoned or trashed as if by joyriders. I know what that looks like, having been victim to a subsequent car theft. It was all as we had left it, fully locked and with all of our belongings as they had been. Nothing had been rifled through, and thankfully all of my tools were still in the boot. It appeared that not so much as a hair had been touched. We all looked at each other, double taking and glancing back along our route in a kind of what the kind of way. But it didn't take us long to rally ourselves, put on our warm coats and get underway, merely thankful that we didn't have to continue the grim march to the police station. I mean, yeah, grateful that your car has turned up, but hey? We talked about it for the next hour or so, all the way home, and as I made the rounds to their individual houses, I could not come up with a logical explanation. A 60s car was fairly sparse in terms of ignition security, but it would still have been a fairly skilled task to hotwire it and would have left some evidence of tampering, which was not the case. Likewise the doors, not as difficult as today's cars to be sure, but still requiring some small skill or keys to overcome the locks. And why would someone steal the car only to abandon it after a couple of blocks and leave valuables undisturbed? We all knew where we'd originally left it. There was no dispute about that, nor individual false memories forced on the others. We'd all headed towards that side street as we'd come out of the club, after all. We couldn't all be that mistaken, and I've always known where I last left my wheels. Couldn't afford to be without them for my job. Bear in mind that we found the car 1 main and 2 side streets away, uphill, so it didn't roll there by itself, nor could it be merely pushed there. I always left the stick shift in gear in case the handbrake failed, which was a sensible precaution in old cars. It made it nigh on impossible to budge, as well as the fact that it would have needed to be steered around the corners, necessitating access to the inside. Added to that, the car was facing in the opposite direction from how we'd left it when going around the corner to the club. If a thief had taken it, they were a very neat and tidy person, leaving it exactly in a meter parking space, which as I would have done had it been me that put it there. Well, we never did report the incident to the police, and although we discussed it a few times in the following years, we never came up with a satisfactory explanation, other than the OCD thief theory. But I guess now that I've found out about glitches in the Matrix, I can finally file this one away as solved. We all stepped out of that nightclub into a slightly different version of the Matrix. Simple as that. But that is really something else. A 100% glitch in the Matrix. For there to be absolutely nothing out of place. Only someone has taken your car, seemingly picked it up and plonked it elsewhere, in the opposite direction, facing uphill, without disturbing anything inside. That's weird. I do have to say though, Robert, maybe better known to some of you as Beachcomber Bob, he pops up in the comments section from time to time. And I just wanted to give him a little shout out as a little extra thank you, as Beachcomber Bob was so unbelievably kind as to be the first person to send the channel a little Christmas gift last year. And you may have actually seen it without realising, as it now sits in the background of my history episodes. I'm gonna see if I can reach it with a dog on my lap. What do you think? It's not real. It's not, no. And it's also not a toy. It is this gorgeous little chap. I'm gonna hope that you can see that well enough. But he needs a name because I still have not thought of one, so leave your best suggestions in the comments. But thank you again, Beachcomber Bob, it is very much appreciated. I realised for those of you who couldn't see a screen, you would have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So the gift was a 3D printed raven skull, which has been painted to look as accurate as I've ever seen a bird skull, and it is absolutely beautiful. So thank you again, Beachcomber Bob. And a huge thank you to Diane, Todd, Jerry, Beachcomber Bob, and the 2 anonymous listeners for sending in their ghost stories. I think there is something exceptionally creepy about encountering something on a dark road, out there alone. Especially if you are truly alone, and on a bike no less, like poor Maggie. But if you have a story that you would like to share, something that happened to you that you just can't explain, weirdness at work, strangeness at school, anything, I would love to hear about it and possibly feature it on the channel. So please do email me at hello@don'tscareclaire.com or use the form pinned in the comments section. I am always so honoured that you choose to share your stories with me. I do not take that privilege lightly. But anyway, if you enjoyed this collection of stories as told to me by the real people who experienced them, then please do give the video a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories like this, make sure that you subscribe. I chat about the history behind the mysteries as well as first-hand witness accounts every single week. But anyway, that is all from me today. Go and get a drink of water. Keep yourself hydrated, please. I cannot wait to chat with you more about the morbid, mysterious and macabre. So until next time, sleep safe. You're gonna have to bear with me. I can hear the washing machine beeping at me, and if I can hear it, there is a chance that the microphone's picking it up. So, Ernie, take it away. Oh. How was that? Your first solo YouTube debut? Did you learn lots of things? It's very interesting. He's got lots of good stories, haven't you, kid?